I'll tell you, in these weird times where we're not getting a lot of new content, anytime you turn on, it could be a digital device, it could be your television set. You're watching something that already happened. Well, in that vein, Chris Leben versus Anderson Silva, which happened many years ago, 2007, was just put out. So I saw that fight. I trained with Chris Leben for that fight. It was Anderson Silva's debut. And we didn't know much about Anderson Silva other than what we read online. Like, he was doing fights in Japan and whatnot that you couldn't even get on TV here. But then you'd check Sherdog the next day, and he won in 11 seconds. And then he fights again, and Anderson Silva beats someone in 21 seconds. And it kept being these fights. He did like 4 or 5 of these that were just remarkably short and fast fights. He ended up having a fight. I'm talking about Anderson. He ended up having a fight in some small off-brand show, but he took on Jeremy Horn. And Jeremy Horn, who fought largely on the underground circuit, was also an absolute legend on that circuit. Jeremy Horn would have a fight on Friday night, drive 2 states all through the night with no sleep, and go have a fight on Saturday. He did this all the time. He put like 50 wins in a row together, something crazy. So he and Anderson go have a great fight, but Anderson beats him. So Anderson's got this big name and big buzz, but he's making his debut. Kind of making his television debut, let alone his promotional debut. So I remember Matt Lindland, who was managing Chris Leben. I remember Matt telling me, we told Joe Silva we will fight anybody else. Just don't give us this guy. And I remember Matt told me that being really surprised because Matt was such a believer in Chris Leben. Matt was a believer in all his guys, but Matt was moreover a believer in competition. You compete with anybody, period. If you have something that you can prove, great, but if you have something to learn, that's fine too. I remember when Matt told me, what am I missing on this guy? This guy's just a guy that had a few fights online. I hadn't seen him either. So they go to the fight, and Anderson controls the fight. So after they aired this, some media member went and interviewed Chris Leben. All these years later, went and interviewed Chris Leben about that fight. And Leben was so funny. He said, yeah, the first time he knocked me down, I remember telling myself, just stay down, because if you get up, nothing good is going to happen. But I wanted to give Anderson a clean win. So I got back up and let him finish me. And you might think that sounds like revisionist history. Knowing Chris Leben the way I know Chris Leben, that's exactly what happened. And he said that he was at dinner after the fight. He was at dinner with his stepmom. And he made a comment to her, and he said, man, I can't believe that fight happened tonight. Can't believe it went that way. And she looked up and she simply said, that fight was yesterday. So he was a little out of it. But one thing about Chris's career that was so interesting, if you go back and look at it, you will find this fascinating just on paper. If you just go look at his fights on paper, it'll blow you away. Chris Leben was such a striker. He had a head made out of concrete. You just simply couldn't hurt him, which is why it was so remarkable when Anderson did. It was this stunning thing, and Anderson, boom, busts on the scene. And just like we've been reading about Anderson, only online, he putting everybody away in a very short amount of time. Okay, well, now he's on TV, and he just did it again against a guy that doesn't get put away. But about Leben being a great striker, he was actually the wrestler killer. If you go and look at the wins he had, even on the underground circuit, Boyd Ballard, Otto Olson come to mind. If you were a really good wrestler, you did not want to fight Chris Leben. Aaron Simpson name comes to mind. Leben just had a way of staying on his feet, of staying away just enough. Boom, boom, boom. He was the last guy that any wrestler would ever want to face, even though his greatest skills were in the stand-up. If you go look, the guys he had problems with were fellow stand-up guys. I don't know why. Very interesting. But if you're a wrestler, stay away from Chris Leben.